Multiculturalism, Israel, and Utopia. All right, I know you're like me. Your heart is just, it's heartbreaking what is happening right now in the Middle East. We have to continue to talk about this because it is, which is why I'm doing it again, why I'm doing so much on this. It is so important that we understand the worldview implications for the world with what is happening. I've been saying on the show for a long time, if there's anything I think that the church has not done well, is people say, John, how have we gotten here? What's the church done? Well, there's lots of different things with, the authority of scripture. We should have gotten involved, I think, in culture and politics. Yeah, all that. But what I've been saying now for 2 or 3 years, we just decided to stop teaching worldview as if it didn't matter, as if everybody pretty much has a Christian worldview. All that really matters is telling people that Jesus loves them, because everybody kind of agrees on everything else. We're seeing now it's actually not true. We got to talk today about multiculturalism. I'm telling you, this episode could be so illuminating for so many people. It's deep. This is a deep episode, or we're going to get into the weeds a little bit, but it's deep, but it's going to give you an understanding. I'm going to read a lot of things from my book, explain these philosophies, because what's happening is a whole host of secular and atheistic ideologies are coming together from all sorts of different places, just bombarding the Christian worldview. They're all off, and they all come from a different perspective, but they join together to have a revolution against Christianity, and it is going to lead us to absolute chaos, destruction. I mean, we are imploding from within, but you have to understand how these things connect with what's happening in Israel. So we're going to dive into some deep stuff. I hope you don't mind. Multiculturalism and postmodernism, Foucault's heterotopia. We're going to dive into it big time, and I hope you like it, because woo, it's going to get deep here in a moment on Cooper Stuff. Hey guys, welcome back to Cooper Stuff. All right, obviously we're doing sort of this week on this Israel stuff. I want to say again, if you're looking for episodes that explain the history of Israel and Palestine, Cooper Stuff's not the one. That's above my pay grade. Don't know that stuff. So if you're looking on up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel, Cooper Stuff is not the episode for you, or we're not the show for you, or that's not what we're doing with this. My concern is on the response to what is happening, understanding how do we move forward in this? Why are we seeing college kids cheer on Hamas? Why are we seeing certain people in the media, BLM, cheering on Hamas? Or why do we see, even with Christians, maybe not cheering on because that's too much, but this moral equivalence of, well, yeah, but this, but also this. Why are we seeing that? Now, the other day when I did this, I started with a quote from my new book. My book is called Wimpy, Weak, and Woke. I'm going to read this quote again to you. We already talked about it today, but today we're talking about multiculturalism to help sort of explain why there's this support for Hamas, this support for Palestine, and why it's even infecting Christianity. It's very, very concerning. All right. Let me read this quote to you again. I read it the other day. It's from my new book. I said, how can we expect to build a society with delusional people? All right, we're living in a time of great delusion. I assume everybody knows that, agrees. Pastor Tim Keller, and by the way, I'm not trying to be up on Tim Keller. I'm just quoting him. That's just the way it is. All right, Tim Keller did a lot of great stuff, but this is a quote I really disagree with. I'll explain to you why. Pastor Tim Keller suggests a way forward, explaining that, quote, Christians should acknowledge common grace and that non-Christians share with us common intuitions about the good, the true, and the just. We should appeal to these common values and work alongside our neighbors in an effort to improve justice in society, end quote. That's in my new book. Why am I reading that quote to you? Here's what's going on. In America, even Christians, we are living in what I believe is the country in all of history that has provided the most freedom, the most liberty, the most self-rule, right? The government can't come in and tell me what I have to believe, how to raise my children, what I have to eat, yada, yada, yada. Self-rule is like unprecedented in history. We have taken that liberty and used that liberty to actually like stifle liberty. It's like we're using our own worldview, our own liberty to have a revolution from inside the country to completely demolish America. That revolution from inside is based on the idea that America is not a good country. It's based on really, really oppressive worldviews and ideas of justice and righteousness and morality. Where do those ideas come from? Well, people like me believe they came from the Bible. They came from Judeo-Christian worldview. Some people may say, oh, that's not exactly true. It's not from the Bible. It was from your distortion of the Bible. In other words, you come from a patriarchal mindset, John. You come from a whiteness mindset, a Eurocentric mindset, and this idea that might makes right, or whatever it is that they want to say. And you have read the Bible through that imperialistic sense and came up with all these things that you say, well, these are biblical values. So American values are biblical values, but they're not really truly biblical. They are your distorted version of biblical values. That's what they have to say. Disagree with them. What it comes down to is this. The revolution against America is a revolution against Christianity, but that is not to say that everybody's agenda is exactly the same. It's not the case. There are lots of revolutions, lots of versions of utopia, lots of versions of what people are actually going to. But the only thing they have in common is revolution against the system. So understand it like this. One of those utopian visions we see right now. My book is called Wimpy, Weak, and Woke. And the subtitle is How Truth Can Save America from Utopian Destruction. I'm not suggesting that everybody has the same version of utopia. So one version right now that I think that America is really buying into is this one world socialistic utopia. That's the Great Reset stuff, World Economic Forum stuff. That is this idea of elites from the top down. It's very socialistic. It has its roots in a lot of even communist, obviously Karl Marx. I talk a lot about Karl Marx in the book, explaining his worldview. But it is a worldview that says we're going to have expert elite class. Maybe they're experts like Dr. Fauci. They're going to tell you, hey, we are the experts on these issues, on medical issues, and you cannot question us because we're the elites. We're the elites on economic issues. You cannot question us. Every aspect of society, a one world sort of socialistic world of equity. There's one revolution that's happening. Well, certainly the people that want that revolution, as you've seen, are supporting the revolution happening in Israel from Gaza, right? From Hamas and Palestine. Well, they're supporting that. Why? Because Hamas also wants to join up with the World Economic Forum for one world socialist? No, they do not. In fact, the really weird thing is to see American leftists supporting the Free Palestine movement and all these various things because their agendas are so very different. For instance, the American radicals are extremely pro-LGBT. I would even say they are LGBT authoritarians. I mean, we're having trans ideology pushed on top of us in an authoritarian style. And if you don't submit, then there's a culture price to pay. You might lose your job. Eventually, I believe there will probably be criminal things, implications of that if you misgender somebody or something like that. That might sound alarmist to you, but that's happening in Canada. UK is that far from that happening. New Zealand, Australia, the Western world is crumbling under this. The LGBT authoritarians are obviously not in agreement with Hamas. You can't live a gay lifestyle in Palestine. That's not a thing that they will put up with. Okay. They will kill you. Okay. So well, John, that's not about the same sort of revolution and the same sort of utopia. Well, it's not the same, but they join together with a revolution against the system. And that is what we have to talk about with multiculturalism. And the fact that we have been indoctrinated in this country, your kids are being indoctrinated in school, K through 12, and then of course in university, to believe that the highest good is multiculturalism. Well, the other irony about this is that the radicals on the left in America are extremely anti what they call Christian nationalism. And what they call Christian nationalism, a lot of time is just people like me and you. When I'm saying, well, I don't call myself a Christian nationalist, but I do think that the Bible has something to say about morality. Our country was founded on that. Our founding fathers quoted the Bible all the time about morality and things. So yeah, I think the Bible has something to say about that. I'm not truly a Christian nationalist. The leftist radicals in America call us Christian nationalists and say, you want to set up some sort of theocracy and you're trying to be authoritarian, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, they are joining together with the Hamas revolution, and the Hamas has actually stated their Islamic nationalistic agenda. So they actually do want a theocracy. They're very open to that. If you look at the let's see, I'm going to look at this 1988 Hamas covenant. I'm reading this. Released on August 18th, 1988, the original covenant spells out clearly Hamas's genocidal intentions. Accordingly, what happened in Israel a couple weeks ago, I'm reading this article. Hold on. Who is this article from so I can tell you? This is The Atlantic, Understanding Hamas's Genocidal Ideology. So in case you want to read it. Understanding what happened in Israel, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, is completely in keeping with Hamas's explicit aims and stated objectives. It was, in fact, the inchoate realization of Hamas's true ambitions. The most relevant of the document, 36 articles, can be summarized as following with four main themes. Number one, the complete destruction of Israel as an essential condition for the liberation of Palestine and the establishment of a theocratic state based on Islamic law. That's actually what they want. So why would American radicals why would American radicals be supporting that when they're constantly saying people like me, who I do not want to set up a theocracy, a Christian theocracy in America? I'm not trying to set that up. Why do they call us Christian nationals if we say, hey, actually, I don't support abortion because the Bible says, yada, yada, and so I don't support that, and they say that we're Christian nationalists, but they are supporting them. What is the deal? Here's what you have to understand the moment we are in. I talk about this in my book. There are a ton of different revolutions and a ton of different ideologies, but they all kind of come together under an umbrella of basically leftist radicalism. Some of it truly is Marxism. Some of it is neo-Marxism, which is basically Marxism taken out of the economic world and then put into the cultural sphere. That would be race. So you could call it race Marxism. You could call it sex Marxism, meaning all this crazy, radical feminism, and then where we've gotten to on the trans ideology stuff. You break it up into that, and then you have race Marxism and all these forms of oppressors and oppressed people, not just in an economic fashion, which was what Marx was talking about, but the neo-Marxists say, yes, same oppressors and oppressed, same revolution against the oppressors. It's just that it's in different forms now. So women have to revolt against men. People of color have to revolt against white people. Homosexuals have to revolt against heterosexuals, on and on and on down the line. In the end, America is an oppressor. So all of this is just leftism, but it comes from a whole bunch of different areas, all right? So that's the thing to understand about the Utopia. I am not suggesting that everybody wants the exact same version of Utopia, which kind of gets me in to the next thing that I want to say. Let me tell you something I am passionate about, as you know. I want to see people 100% free from pornography. Not a little bit, 100% all the way free. And that is exactly what Covenant Eyes does, all right? They have been doing this for over 20 years. They've helped 1.5 million people get free from pornography addiction, and they are on your side. I have a friend who's a pastor, and I said, hey, do you know about Covenant Eyes? And he said, dude, me and all of my elders have been a part of Covenant Eyes for years. And he swears by it. He's like, this thing is serious, and it has helped lots of people in churches all around the nation. Not just churches, but churches do it, elders do it, families do it, friends do it, all right? Let me tell you, pornography is ripping families apart, and it's something that we have tolerated and we should not have tolerated, and it's something that people thought, well, if I only do a little bit, it's not going to affect me and blah, blah, blah. I personally know people whose marriages have been ripped apart because of this. All right. It is absolutely deadly. But with accountability and with the power of the Spirit, I am telling you, you can break free from this. I got good news. I know people whose marriages have been put back together because they broke free from pornography. So here's what you do. Go to covenanteyes.com, use promo code Cooper. That's my last name, Cooper, of course. Cooper is the promo code. You're going to get a free month trial. That's what it's about. You and a partner, get a partner to do it. Someone you trust, someone that you love, someone that says, hey, I want to be in this with you and I want to break free of this with you. You can do it. All right. Trust me. Go to covenanteyes.com, promo code Cooper, get your first month free. I want to read this quote. This is the new Mark Levin book. It's called The Democrat Party Hates America. I'm just going to read this very quickly. This is written from Jonathan S. Tobin, who is the editor-in-chief for the Jewish News Service. He's just explaining, he's doing it for the purpose to explain the modern Republican kind of party versus the modern Democrat Party, where they land on the Israel thing. But you're going to find this interesting, I think. So he says, the reality of contemporary politics is the GOP is a lockstep pro-Israel party where philo-Semitism is the norm. The opposite is true of the Democratic Party, whose intersectional left wings embrace. Now, the word intersectional there means intersectionality, as we talked about. That is multiple intersecting forms of oppression. Okay, so again, that can be race, sex, gender, etc. So meaning people of color are oppressed from white people, women are oppressed by men, other religions are oppressed by Christianity, homosexuals are oppressed by heterosexuals. That's called intersectionalities. That's what he means when he says that. So the Democratic Party, whose intersectional left wing's embrace of critical race theory has driven growing hostility to Israel and support for ideologues in the Black Lives Matter movement that embrace the idea that Jews are white oppressors. And rather than isolating their extremists, the party's progressive wing and pop culture and media cheering sections have embraced them. Tobin explained, this is Mark Levin writing, Tobin explains that for many on the left, their goal is to redefine anti-Semitism in a way so as to label the demonization of Israel and the Jews as legitimate discourse rather than hate speech. So I think you'll find that interesting. So what we see here is BLM, who you would think has nothing in common with Hamas in this situation, especially because BLM is so overly pro-LGBT. That most of what BLM has done in America has advanced the rights of transgender people and things like that, as opposed to actually helping any people of color or Black lives. That's my opinion. It seems pretty obviously true to me. So you put these things together. What are we actually still getting at? What we are getting at is this. We are not allowed to judge other cultures. That is part of the postmodern worldview we're dealing with. And we call this multiculturalism. And the idea, and the reason so many Christians kind of go for it, is because Christians recognize that all men have sinned. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So we don't look at it and say, oh yeah, so this colored person or that ethnicity or this class of person, a person who has X amount of money versus somebody who has less money, or a person that comes from a certain part of the globe is like somehow more righteous than someone else. We do not have inherent righteousness. We do not have original righteousness. We have original sin. So Christians recognize that. And because we recognize that, we believe that Christ died for every tribe and every tongue. Right? That's the thing. The gospel goes into the entire world. And that's part of what Jesus told us to do. The Great Commission, as before he ascends to heaven, after his death, burial, resurrection, he says, go into all the world, make disciples of the nations, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. So you go to the world. Well, we like that. We like that. And so this idea of globalization, but multiculturalism, we go, okay, maybe we've been on the wrong side of history on a lot of things. Namely, we feel so guilty about slavery, chattel slavery in America, that we had chattel slavery, we had the eugenics movement, which led to the Holocaust and all the crazy, absolute horrible things. Well, the world kind of decided after that, that there really is nothing in the world worse than racism. It is the absolute worst thing ever, ever. And it's the worst thing you can call somebody in America because of that history. And so because we mess all of that up, then we need to be very open to multiculturalism, very open to accepting other cultures the way they are, not bringing judgment upon them and say, well, actually, you're bad because you guys have done this and this and this, but instead being open to everything. And so the move for multiculturalism is to say, you're evil if you say, hey, if you live in America, you really should speak the language. Now that sounds harsh, right? If you say, people live here and they don't even speak English, that sounds like a racist thing to someone, even though in reality, that was just the position of the United States up until very, very, very recently. And in general, that would be the position of most all sovereign nations. How are you going to do business with people who don't speak the same language? How are you going to have a common understanding of law, of actually obeying the law? You have to communicate some way. So there was an idea of, hey, all of us come from a similar land. We have ties to the land, maybe, or we have ties to this culture that we've embraced. We share moral ideas, and that is why in America, whether people were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if people were Christian or not, we shared ideas about morality. 20 years ago, you did not have to convince non-Christians that a lot of what the Bible says is moral was actually moral. You know, to convince non-Christians that cheating on your spouse was an immoral thing to do. Lots of people do it. Lots of people did it. They didn't think they were morally justified for doing it in the way we do now. Do you understand what I'm saying? Why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, the secularization of American things. But all this multiculturalism is coming in and saying, really, we should be a melting pot. What's one of the things you hear in politics all the time from the left? Diversity is our greatest strength. We're constantly hearing it. So the idea is that you can take anybody from all over the whole world and plant them in America. And because of our liberal democratic ideas and our openness to conversations, everybody's pretty much going to get along. Why? I read you Tim Keller's quote earlier, because all people have common intuitions about what is good and beautiful and just, Tim Keller says. Well, does that seem true right now? Do people in Israel and people in Palestine, do they have common intuitions about what is good and just? Does Hamas and Israel have common intuitions about what is righteous and what's the right thing to do here? No. Do Americans any longer have that common, thing? No. So what are we dealing with? I want to read you something else from my book. And everybody knows you can go and John L. Cooper, pre-order the book. It explains a ton of this stuff. We're moving into postmodernism. You got to understand Marxism. Then we had the neo-Marxists, which, by the way, neo-Marxism is the same thing as critical theory. If you hear people talk about critical theory, neo-Marxism is the same exact thing as we talked earlier. You probably hear people talk about critical race theory. Critical race theory is an offshoot of critical theory, which means that critical race theory is based on neo-Marxism. You have postmodernism coming at the same time. A lot of these concepts they're not the same, but they share a lot of similar values. Some of the similar values of critical theory and postmodernism, which kind of collided and gave us really like critical race theory is sort of a mixture of these two things. And a lot what we're in. What a lot of them agree on is oppression and power. Excuse me. They would say everything is nothing more than power. You've probably heard people say racism is power plus privilege. Have you ever heard that? Power plus privilege. To a lot of us, we say, no, that's newer. It didn't used to mean that. That comes from a combination of critical theory, the 1960s liberation movements, which was sort of the kind of I guess you would say like the sea, if you will. That was like the melting pot of ideas. You had neo-Marxism, then you had these liberation movements, and some of those would be like maybe the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Front, things like that, for liberation. And then you also had Marxist communist things happening around the world at this time, right? So you've got Che Guevara in the South. You got Mao Zedong, and we at that point we've had Stalin. You're having all these communist things happening, liberation fronts trying to decide what they are, and then at the same time you got these French philosophers who call themselves structuralists or post-structuralists, who end up forming postmodernism. All of these things are coming together, but what they agree on is this idea of oppressors and oppressed and power. And so what they begin to do is to say it is bigoted, it is evil, it is oppressive, it is imperialistic, it is colonialistic for someone to say our ideas are better than your ideas. You see what I'm saying? And because of that, it has so shaped us. I'm going to read this, but we're talking about 60 years that has so shaped us that now even Christian college students who probably have good hearts are looking at what's happening in Hamas and they're saying, well, yeah, but yeah, that is what they're doing. But look, they're under certain kinds of oppression. It's not right to say that their ways are any worse than anybody else's other ways. That's very, very arrogant. It's very prejudicial. You see what I'm saying? It's arrogant to look at America and say, America's the greatest nation on the earth. Now they call that bigoted and prejudiced. Even people that I love, some of my best friends in the world who love God, who I aspire to be like them in my life with holiness. When I talk about America being the greatest nation on earth, they go, I'm really uncomfortable with that. It's moving towards Christian nationalism. It's moving toward arrogance. It's moving towards we're better than other people. And I'm blown away because we have a Bible that tells us how to live. And the Bible tells us that there's a difference between righteousness and wickedness. So yes, some ideas are bad. Some ideas are worse than other ideas. So let me read this from my book as you begin to understand this. Postmoderns promote pluralism, which means that every culture must celebrate other cultures. Have you noticed that today in the 2020s? Why is it that I have to celebrate gay lifestyles? Like, if you want to live a gay lifestyle, that's your right. We're in America. Live and let live. You do what you want to do. You believe what you want. I believe what why do I have to say? Why can I not go buy a bag of Oreos without having a picture of a transgender person on the Oreos? Why do I have to celebrate that? Because of this concept. You have to celebrate multiculturalism. Otherwise, it's oppression. That's what heteronormativity is. It's making heterosexuality the normal culture, and that is oppression. That is hate speech. That is harmful. You guys know about Hawk and Hatchet. That is my company. Hawkandhatchet.com has the awesomest gifts for dudes. It's not just dudes, it's for girls too, candles and stuff like that. There's Girls Apothecary, but some of my favorite stuff, have you seen our beard oil? If you're watching the video, look how cool it is. This is a particular one called Salute, but beard oils, we've got beard bombs. I've got my own line, as you know, but I'll tell you what, we're mostly known for our candles. Our candles are amazing. And one of my favorite candles is called Cabin. It smells just like you're at a cabin. And so we're going to run a sale on it. Now, we have two sales going on, as you know. Right now, we have the fall candle, which I told you last week. That promo code is fall for coop, and you're getting a percentage off on that order. If you go on there, you order it, you go and you put your promo code in, fall for coop, you're going to get money off on that fall candle, which is good. A lot of women love the fall candle, but there's a cabin candle, and we're also going to be running a sale on that. You're getting $4 off for the candle. It's called Cabin, the promo code Cabin. Both of these codes are going to work, and they're for both candles. So go check it out. The Cabin one, it's so cool. It smells like you're at a cabin. You're having a campfire, but it's also kind of like smells like wood. It's just really great. Dudes love it. Chicks love it too. And so go check it out, hawkandhatchet.com. Again, we have two promo codes. Number one is fall for coop. The second promo code is Cabin. Let me keep reading my book. This is me writing. Meaning can only be found in experiences, according to postmoderns. So the more diverse experiences and learning from other people's quote unquote truths, the larger our understanding of reality becomes. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? In other words, there is no eternal truth. There is no absolute right and wrong. You cannot judge somebody else's culture. So it's all about experience. And I don't know the experience of that transgender person that I have to celebrate when I buy my bag of Oreos during Pride Month. But if I can understand their experience, if I can empathize if I can, quote unquote, what's the word? Listen to the experience of oppressed people, well, now I'm getting a deeper understanding of truth. Why? Because diversity is our biggest strength. It's not truth that's our biggest strength. It's not the Bible that's our biggest strength. It is not moral, a divine law that's our biggest strength. No. It's diversity, understanding the experiences or quote unquote truths of other people. I have to hear the quote truth of a person of color. I have to hear the quote unquote truth of the trans person, of the oppressed person. Do you see what I'm saying? That's how we get a bigger understanding of reality, according to postmoderns. The larger our understanding of reality becomes. The goal is to live for the moment, collecting as many experiences as one can, and raising the voices of other quote unquote truths in order to understand a more fully, quote, shared reality. I'm going to continue reading from my book. In postmodernist culture, Steve Connors says, quote, the postmodern condition manifests itself in the multiplication of centers of power and activity and the dissolution of every kind of totalizing narrative which claims to govern the whole complex field of social activity and representation, end quote. All right, I know it's a long quote. Let me take it a little bit at a time. Here he goes again. The postmodern condition manifests itself in the multiplication of centers of power and activity. All right, what do I mean by centers of power? Who is a center of power? I just said heteronormativity, heterosexuals. That's a center of power. That's not okay. We need multiple centers of power. How do you get a multiple? So if heterosexuals have power, who is that power against? Gay people, lesbians, transgender people, two-spirit gender, whatever you want to call it. So now what do we got to do? We have to have equity, which is that everybody has the same outcomes, right? Equity in the amount of power for all sexual activities, we'll call it. Sexual identities. That's a better word that the world uses right now. So what we need to do, you see, we need to lower the voice and the power of heterosexual people and heteronormativity. That is the heterosexual is the norm in society. This includes things like only having a men's bathroom and a women's bathroom. We have to decenter them by saying, okay, we're taking your power away and we are giving more power, another quote, center of power is what they call it, unquote. We're giving more power to homosexual people, to lesbians, to transgender people. How do you do that? You say, okay, you know what? Anybody can use whatever bathroom that you identify. A boy, if he identifies as a girl, he can use the girl's bathroom. That is how you decenter power. That's what he means by this. So let's go back to his quote. So we are multiplying the centers of power and activity and the dissolution of every kind of totalizing narrative. You know what a totalizing narrative? Remember that phrase. I'll explain it. Totalizing narrative, which claims to govern the whole complex field of social activity and representation. What is a totalizing narrative? A totalizing narrative is a grand story of the world. So what is a totalizing narrative of sexuality in the Christian world? The totalizing narrative is that male and female, God created them. That's a totalizing narrative. Totalizing narrative. He only created men and women. He didn't create another category. All right. He didn't create two spirits and fluid and everything. Yeah, that's how it is. Male and female. And then male and female come together and they procreate and they keep the society going. And that is the normal way it works because God created the world. What he's saying is, no, you have to dissolve that. You have to dissolve that totalizing narrative and give power to the other narratives so we can have, quote, equity. This is what postmodern wants to do. And you might be asking yourself, but I thought postmodernism didn't believe that there was such a thing as absolute truth. They don't. So then why do they care? That's a really good question. I try to answer in the book, but there really is not a lot of an answer besides because they're utopian. They're leftist. They're not exactly Marxist. They're not exactly on the Black Liberation Army, or they're not exactly Mao Zedong's kind of communist. They're not exactly those things, but they have the same fervor for revolution against this system. They're not the same as Hamas, but they have the same fervor for we got to destroy these systems of power for the oppressed because everything is about power. Now keep reading, going back to my book. I just quoted that long thing. I say, Connor is saying that since there are no universal truths, then attempting to find a guiding ethos between all societies is impossible and pointless. Since there is nothing but power, we must have a multitude of centers of power rather than a ruling culture. In other words, we must promote pluralism, multiculturalism, and moral relativism. There is no foundation or bedrock principle that gives transcendent meaning. Standards for truth or morality, things that have value, things that should be avoided. Society should be a mesh of societies. That is what's going on in America, to tear down America. Now you say, well, but for what point? Well, some want the World Economic Forum. Some want Islamic nationalism. As I explained earlier, some just might want full, I don't know, libertarianism. Nobody tells anybody else what to do. We end up in like moral anarchy, where everybody just does whatever's right in their own eyes, like we read in the book of Judges. Just do whatever's right in your eye. I don't know, just do it. Or some want actual government tyranny. Now, World Economic Forum, all these one world socialist things is what Glenn Beck calls 21st century fascism, which I think is a really good name for it. Yeah, they absolutely want tyranny from the top down. They want to create a world of equity and this, that, and the other. How are you going to do it? You have to stamp down on centers of power. Christianity, men, heterosexuality, owning property, all these things have to go away. I would like to share with you another concept. Michel Foucault is probably the most famous of the postmoderns. He has this idea he calls heterotopia. Heterotopia is just this. It's two words. Hetero, which means different, other than. Sometimes you might hear the word orthodox. Orthodox becomes from the word ortho. So we're talking about unity. People that are heterodox are sort of against the prevailing narratives. So hetero just means other. So you have hetero, and then you have topia. Topia means place. So a utopia. Utopia is this perfect world we're going to create, and it's going to be. He talks about heterotopia. The idea of heterotopia is going to be worlds within worlds. Okay, we're talking about groups within groups, nations within nations of people who have countervailing points of view, people that are against the system. They create their own heterotopia that's against everything else. This is our multicultural sort of like, we all come together and everybody kind of does what they want to do, and it's all going to work because why? Because humans are good, and we all sort of we might want different things, but nobody should be able to tell anybody else what to do. And so the obvious thing you say is that, well, how are we going to do that? Because one group of people is going to want the death of the other group of people. We're seeing that right now in Israel. They're going to want to do that. Well, the postmoderns don't believe that. They just believe everything is about power. The only reason anybody would want the death of another person is because they're oppressed. It's not because they're evil. It's not because they have evil intentions. It's because they've had their feelings hurt, or they've been abused, or something has happened in culture that has hurt them. It's the reason that BLM supported the burning down of cities. It's the reason that BLM supports Hamas going in and chopping the heads off of baby. Paragliders coming into a rave and mowing down with guns, mowing down innocent people. And then BLM Chicago puts a graphic of a person gliding in with a gun saying, we support Palestine. It's the reason. So heterotopia, let me read a couple of things for you so you can understand what we're dealing with. Foucault uses the term heterotopia to describe spaces that have more layers of meaning or relationships to other places than immediately meet the eye. In general, a heterotopia is a physical representation or approximation of a utopia or a parallel space that contains undesirable bodies to make a real utopian space possible. Foucault uses the link between utopias and heterotopias using the example of a mirror. A mirror is a utopia because the image reflected is a, quote, placeless place. guys, I'm sorry. This is postmodern. So these people are insane. It's hard to understand what they're talking about. So the mirror is the image is reflected as a placeless place, an unreal virtual place that allows one to see one's own visibility. However, the mirror is also a heterotopia in that it is a real object. The heterotopia of the mirror is at once absolutely real, relating with the real space surrounding it, and absolutely unreal, creating a virtual image. Now, I know you're like, this makes no sense. Foucault's elaborations on heterotopias were published in an article, blah, blah, blah. The philosopher calls for a society with many heterotopias, not only as a space within several places of /for the affirmation of difference, but also as a means of escape from authoritarianism and repression, stating metaphorically that if we take the ship as the utmost heterotopia, a society without ships is inherently a repressive one. All right, you're listening to me. You're like, don't know what I'm. Here's what we're getting at: multiculturalism, heterotopia. So we're going to create these utopias, but there's also these heterotopias of people that are absolutely other than. They're the despised people. They're the ones that are against the narrative, but they're going to all live together. And somehow we're going to create a society where everybody just kind of like is kind of cool for everybody to just live together. All the contradictions you see, they won't be contradictions anymore because they will kind of magically all mesh together. Does that sound to you a little mystical? It's because it is mystical. It is a false oneness. Christianity promotes the unity in the body of Christ made possible by the blood of Jesus Christ. So what does that mean? That means that people from every nation, every tribe, every tongue and every tribe across the whole earth who are saved, who are born into the family of God, that means that me and you and people in India and China, all around the world, we have all these different ethnicities and different ideas of culture and different foods we like and this and the other. But we all come together in perfect oneness, spiritually, in covenant, made possible by Jesus Christ and the work of the Holy Spirit. He's creating one body of Christ. The Bible calls that the one new man sometimes. Jesus is the head. We are the body of Christ, and we are all in perfect unity. Well, postmodernism, Marxism, these things, they want to create a fake version of that. It is a faux version of unity to where we all come together. We all totally disagree. So one person says, I actually think that justice is chopping the heads off of little innocent babies for jihad, for the glory of Allah. And the other person says, actually, I think justice is like not murdering children based on their religion or their ethnicity or where they live or what their parents have done. Good gosh. I mean, right? How are those going to come together in perfect heterotopia? It is going to be a mesh of multiculturalism because man is inherently good. It's what people have got to understand. They believe man is inherently good. And if we just stop the oppression, everything is going to work out. Does this make sense? Let me explain it to you this way. All right, here's what they believe. Utopia, even though there's different versions of utopia, will be the end of oppression. Therefore, this is where it meets the road. This is what my book talks about. This is why you got to go to my website and pre-order this sucker. Give it to somebody who just don't get it. All right, somebody doesn't get it, doesn't understand what's going on, or they're on the wrong side of this junks. Give them this book. Western civilization, to the utopians, to the postmoderns, to the Marxists, to the neo-Marxist, to the sexual liberation folks, to the radical feminist, all right, to the great resetters, the one world socialists, 21st century fascism, as Glenn Beck calls it, whatever you want to call it, to all those people, listen to this. Western civilization is not liberty. It is not justice. It is not freedom for all peoples. They believe that Western civilization is oppressive. It has only one center of power, not multiple centers of power, as I just explained. One center of power that guides men, white people, heterosexuals, Christians. is ruling everybody else based on their version of reality, okay, and their principles and their guiding narrative of the world, their totalizing narrative, as that quote I read to you, or like a grand story of the world. We are oppressing everybody else for that reason. And because we are oppressing people, that means everybody that's not in those categories that I just listed, white men, white heterosexual Christian men, anybody that's not in that, or anybody that doesn't internalize those ideas, is actually living under brutal oppression. And it has to end. It is actually, well, let me keep going. Western civilization is not liberty and freedom and justice. The opposite is true. America has caused the most oppression in the world because it is not a stabilizing force. It is a destabilizing force. That's the reason that this week, when they had the day of rage or whatever it was called, that Hamas said, we're going to have a day of rage where we want the whole world raging for Palestine to overtake Israel, calling for violence and all sorts of stuff. It's the reason that Iran, people in Iran, they weren't shouting free Palestine. They were shouting death to America. Why are they? What? I thought this was about Israel and the fact that they're a colonizing group in an apartheid system. No, this isn't about that. This is about destroying Christian civilization. Death to America. What does America have to do with what's going on? All right. So here's what they agree on. They agree that America's role in the earth and their influence in the earth is huge. It is impactful. It is important. And what America says, there goes the world. They agree with that. But they have inverted it from America being a stabilizing force for good and truth and freedom and justice into being a destabilizing voice. Why? Because we are promoting our version of democracy, our version of freedom, which they actually call oppression. Why? Because the Bible is oppressive. The Bible is evil. The Bible is the root of all of our problems, according to these people. That of course, would be Hamas. That would be Iran. But that would also be American Marxist, American neo-Marxists, American followers of critical theory, the Great Resetters, World Economic Forum type folks, and even a lot of people on the Christian left. They would argue with me about that. And there's an argument to be had there. Some of them, I think, are just useful ignorance of it. The actual word is useful idiots, but I don't want to call them idiots and people think I'm being rude to them. So I call them useful ignorance. Useful idiots is an actual term, all right? Going back to this, to the leftist, and the sort of like post-colonial theory type people that say we got to decolonize. True freedom would be for every indigenous group of people taking back their own land, having their own culture and their own perspectives, not being oppressed by colonial rule. But here's the $10 million question. Tell me why then, why is America pushing for LGBTQ rights in Africa? If we really believe in heterotopia, if we believe in multiculturalism and nobody has the right to judge someone else's societies, and we shouldn't be doing that, and we all going to come together and all these utopias with little heterotopias and that are all there and we all celebrate, nobody, then why are we pushing for transgender ideology to be taught in Zambia or wherever around the earth? Why is America sending drag queens to these to these other countries to educate them in LGBTQ rights? Why are we doing that? If we truly believe in multiculturalism and nobody has the right to judge other people's cultures, why are we doing that? Why are we forcing them to celebrate Pride Month? This is all a utopian dream. Here's what Christians have to know, and Americans. If you're not Christian, if you're American, this is what I believe. We have to be able to say some cultures are better than other cultures. That is not prideful. It's actually insane that people would say that is prideful. And I know that the people on the left who say that we're being arrogant for saying that, they also believe that, or they wouldn't be saying, man, these people in Zambia are backwards. I mean, homosexuality is illegal there. Hello, that you're doing the same exact thing. In other words, the people shouting for tolerance are not nearly as tolerant as they actually believe. Why? Because in contradiction to the late Tim Keller, not all cultures have common intuitions about the good, beautiful, and the just. It's just simply not true. The Bible tells us what is just. The Bible tells us what is good and what is right. And that is not Christian nationalism to say. That is what this country was founded upon. The question has got to come down for Christian people and our pastors who are so quick to bash America. By the way, it's fine if they want to criticize America. Criticize that America's done that. I get it. It's not like you can't criticize America. It's not a perfect country. Of course, there are the exact amount of perfect countries as there are perfect people. 0. Yeah, you can criticize things America's done. But why are you bashing the country so fast, but you are not quick to say that these founding principles are better than other ones? What's going on here? There's something going on here that we need to get bottom of, because we don't all have common intuitions, and it is not like you are going to be void of a worldview. Everybody is bringing their worldview to the table. People have got to understand, if we don't understand this revolution against America, it is going to end in such destruction. And for people that are like, yeah, John, you're on about the Bible. I mean, how do you know that's what is that it's right and that those morals? I would say, why don't you do some thinking about whether you believe it's better to live in America or the Gaza Strip? Is it better to live in America or somewhere where you do not have the freedom of speech? Do you think that economic principles have worked for America? Do you think that the fact that, over the last several hundred years that like lifespans have gotten longer, we're curing a lot more diseases, world poverty, like something like 75% of the extreme poverty of the world has been ended since 1975 due to the advances of capitalism that all the Marxists are saying are really super duper evil. 75% of extreme world poverty has been eradicated because of these things, namely because of the generosity of America and the incredible amount of wealth created in America. Do you think that's good? Or do you think that maybe it's bad? Because if you actually think it's good, then you got to ask yourself the question, where do these principles come from? They came from the Bible. That means you got to ask your question. They came from the Bible, and the Bible was written thousands of years ago. Then maybe is there something to it that is divine? Is there maybe something to it that is actually true, that these principles actually work? And what it has to say about human nature actually makes sense. And the idea of multiculturalism, bringing people together from all over the world, and we come here and we sing Kumbaya, my Lord. Nope, you're dead. You're not allowed to say Lord. You see what I'm saying? You're not allowed to sing Jesus up in his piece, or you're not allowed to do whatever. Do you think that's a good idea or maybe a bad idea? Hello. Woo! I'll tell you what. Go to johnlcooper.com, pre-order my new book, Wimpy, Weak, and Woke, right now as we talk. We have to educate Americans on this topic, or we are going to lose our freedom. And we have to educate Christian Americans on this topic so they actually understand that if you want the freedom to preach the gospel that sets people free without government recriminations on you, then you better start speaking out for American freedoms. Have a great week.
Read the Bible.